Mishnah Rashi, the Torah portion, Emor. We're in the third reading. Let us get right into the reading. We are in chapter 22, verse number 17, continuing with offerings. Okay, let's offer us up. And Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber al Aaron, continuing to speak to Aaron, right? He's the high priest, Albanav, and to his sons, who are the Kohanim, the regular priests, El Kol Bnei Israel, and to the entire Jewish people. Mamar Talehim, and say the following to them. Ish, man, meaning every person. Mi Beis Israel, from the house of Israel. Only a ger be Israel. Or, also, not or, and, I guess or, it's either or, right? From the convert of the Jewish people, Yakriv Karbon, when he will bring his offering, L'chol Nidreihem. And what's the offering for? For their vows. V'chol Nidvaisam, or for all of their gift offering that they dedicated, right? They said, their child's birthday, or the child was born, so they want to gift something to the sanctuary, right? So they made a gift offering. Asher yakrivu l'Hashem, that they will offer to God, la'oila, for an ascent offering. Ascent means it's totally burnt up on the altar, right? As opposed to, for example, like a peace offering that is eaten by the Kohanim and the owners of the animal. Okay, let's see Rashi. Nidreihem. So he says their vows. First, the pledges that are made by using the formula Hare alai. Behold, it is upon me. In other words, I take upon myself. That's a vow. That you're taking upon yourself, right? Nidvoisam. So that is the formulaire is Harezu. Behold this particular lie. Thank you. So what's the difference between them? One is a general obligation. I'm taking upon myself an offering. Another one is that you're pointing to this animal, that this animal is going to be the offering, who I'm dedicating, right? That's the difference between the two. But both of them are about bringing offerings on the altar of God. Okay, 19. It has to be for your favor. Tamim Zachar Babakar. It has to be, Tamim means complete, whole, pure, in other words, without a blemish. Zachar is a male, a bakar of the cattle, the ksavim, sheep, of the izim and goats. Rashi, what does it mean over here that it has to be, for an appeasement, for a favor? You have to bring something aroi that is fitting, that should appease me before me. It should be an appeasement for you. In Old French, apaiement. So what is that fitting for to be appeased? Tamim has to be pure. Zachar, male, bakar, from a goat, from kvasim, from sheep, obizim, or from goats. Right. Aval, but regarding an oila offering that's from fowl, that didn't mention over here, ein sarich does not require tammuz to be whole. In other words, it doesn't have to be in a state of being unblemished. V'zachris, and it doesn't have to be male. Ve'eno nivsal b'mum, and it's also not disqualified by a blemish, by a mere blemish, ella, but by lacking a limb. So if it was lacking a limb, then you couldn't bring it on the altar. Okay. Next verse. Kol yesh by mum. So all that has in it a mum, a blemish, Loisakrivu, do not bring it on the altar. Don't offer it. Because it's not an appeasement. For you. Right? It won't find favor for you. Why is this is making a negative commandment, a prohibition. Becomes a prohibition. In the previous, it was just what you should bring, right? But that doesn't make it into a law of a prohibition that you would transgress. When you say it in the negative, then it becomes a lav, one of the 365 lavin. So in that sense, it's not a repetition, even though it sounds repetitive. So okay. 21. So that was a burnt offering. Now it's going to speak about a peace offering. Hey, you need tissue? What you got? Okay. And a man, and he will offer zevach shlomim, a feast offering of a shlomim, of a peace offering, la Hashem, for God, lefela neder, as articulated by a neder, by a vow, by nedava, or by a dedication. What was a vow? A vow means I'm going to bring an offering. Nedava is I'm going to bring this particular thing as an offering, right? This animal, a bakar of cattle, of a tzoin, of a sheep. Tamim, it has to be pure. Yelaratzin, in order that it should find favor. Kol mum lo yeboy, there should not be any blemish to it. Rashi lefela neder lahafrish b'dibura. The word lefela means to articulate, right? In other words, you have to separate it by articulating your vow. In other words, if you just think it, you're not obligated. You have to articulate it, right? That's what this verse is coming to tell us. Okay. 22.
Amen.
Oh, okay. Okay. Irais. So no, we had it wrong. Averis, blind. In other words, this is referring to the animal now. A blind animal, or shavar, a broken bone, or charutz, or it has a split in the eyelid or the lip. Yabelis, it's got a wart, or garav, a dry boil. We had these terms yesterday. Oyalephis, or an oozing boil. I don't know if it said that yesterday, an oozing, but lo sakrivu, do not offer it. Ela la Hashem, these to God. Ishe loititnu mehem, and of its fire, don't give from it. Alamizbeach, of its fire, don't give it on the altar. La Hashem, to God. Rashi. Okay. Averis, blindness. Shem davar shel muma ivarein. It's a noun speaking about the blemish of blindness, but lashon nekeva in the feminine form. Shlo yeboy, that it should not have this mum of a blindness. Or shavar, or broken, lo yeh, should not be. I don't know, Rashi added by should not be. Since it's since it's an adjective as opposed to blindness was a noun, this is an adjective, so that's why Rashi adds it shouldn't be in it to fill out the Charutz, cut, ris shel ayin shenizdak, means from the eyelid that is split, or shenivgam, or is marred, or something of that Category, Svasai Shenizdaka, a lip also that was split, or Nivgama, or was marred. Right, this is the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, right, that was split. And anyways, Yabelis, then Old French, Veru, Garav, some of the Amina Chazazis, a type of rash, V'chein Yalefis, and also a Yalefis, Lashon Yalefis, Kamoi, Yalefis Shimshain, Shimshain to cold, meaning it describes an eruption of the verse. Achuza boy that's taken hold ad misa until its death. She'ein la refuah that has no cure. So it's this kind of, I guess, something erupting in the skin that is not going to be healed and no cure for it. Okay, lo sakriva, you should not offer. Shleisha pamim, it says you should not offer is mentioned 3 times. Wow, I didn't notice that. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, the next verse has, or 2 verses down has, right? Not in this one verse, verse 20, and then verse 24. We'll see that in a moment. Okay, lahazir. So it's to state the negative commandment, because of the consecration of the blemished animal, al shchitason. In other words, why is it saying 3 times? Don't offer, don't offer, don't offer. Because there's 3 different possibilities in bringing the offering. One is to consecrate the blemished animal. Don't do that. Ashkitasan, don't slaughter the blemished animal. Valsrikas damam, and the sprinkling of the blood on the altar, don't do it when we're speaking about an offering that is blemished. In other words, the blemish could be found at different times. And if the blemish is found at any one of those 3 times, that's why the verse is repeating, or in these 2 verses 3 times, to tell us the 3 different possibilities of where there could be found, that you found the blemish. Right? You might think, in other words, after you offered it and you didn't find a blemish, but before the slaughtering it, then you found the blemish, right? Well, it's been offered already, so maybe no, you shouldn't. Now you slaughtered it, you didn't find a blemish, but then after checking, you found the blemish after the slaughtering and before sprinkling the blood. No, don't. You should not place them on the fire offering as hard as Aktarasam. So this is a negative commandment against burning it on the altar. Right, so that's a 4th thing, right? That is another prohibition. Interesting. Okay. Sharvaseh. Next verse 23. A bull, a sheep, sarua. Sarua means their limbs are mismatched. They're not the same size. Kolut means the hooves are joined. Nedava ta'aseh, so you should make it into a dedication offering. Interesting. But for your vow, it will not, you can't sacrifice it. What does this mean? Let's see, Rashi in 23. Sarua. So Sarua, Aver Gadol Michaveroi, the one body part is larger than another, right? Another, like one eye is larger than another, one foot is larger than another. Kalut, it's undivided. Parsos says kalutais, its hooves are joined. In other words, it's a kosher animal, but for some reason its hooves got joined, right? So that's not something that could be put on the altar. The davatase I say, you should make it into a voluntary offering, the bedekabayis for upkeep of the holy temple. In other words, you can consecrate it. So what's going to happen? this kind of animal, you could consecrate it to the holy temple. Then what does holy temple have from it? It's going to sell it. It's going to sell it and have the money thereof. So you could give it as an offering when it is coming from the vow, or sorry, a voluntary offering. Well, a neder, but when it comes to a vow, to put it on the altar, it's not going to be appeased. Eze hektish, what kind of holy object? Ba leratzis, it comes to appease. Havi Emor, say hektish amizbeach, that this is holy for the offering of the altar. In other words, if you are specifically coming in to say that this animal is an offering for the altar, that will not be appeased. Why? Because it's got a blemish to it, right? But if you want to give it to the Bedek Habayis, to the upkeep of the holy temple, right? In other words, you're giving the animal, but it's not going to the altar. You're giving it to the sanctuary, and then the sanctuary, they're going to take it and they're going to sell it because they can't use it. It's got a blemish to it, right? But they could sell it to someone that will then, well, if I recall correctly, once it's sold, it doesn't have the same holiness to it. So then it could be, I don't know if it has to go to pasture. I don't recall now that. No, it has a blemish already, so it doesn't have to go to pasture. No, to get a blemish. So then the person, it takes away the holiness from it when it's purchased. So in other words, sorry. Yeah, or you could use it as if you want to use it for plowing your field, the ox, you could use it, or you could slaughter it, right? Because by purchasing it from the sanctuary, then that money becomes now holy in the sanctuary, that money will be used to buy other animals that will be fitting for the altar. So that you're allowed to do. Okay. 24. Ma'och. Now, again, these are things that are not fitting of animals. Ma'och means squashed. It's referring to the reproductive organs that are squashed. Vikosus, crushed. Disconnected, says for the seminal ducts. Okay. Nasuk, severed from the seminal ducts. Disconnected or severed, either one. Crushed. Oh, no, disconnected and then severed. Right. Karus is disconnected. Loisakrivu, do not offer it, La Hashem, to God. And in your land, do not do this. In others, don't do anything to maim an animal. Rashi. Okay, long Rashi over here. So the beitzim gid, this is referring to the testicles or the male organ. Ma'och, right? Mashed. Ketza ma'uchim biyad. Its testicles are mashed by hand. Ooh, okay. Kosus, squashed. This is more squashed more severely crushed than the previous one that was mashed. Nosuk is disconnected. Telushim biyad, torn by hand. Nifsiku chutim telushim bahem, until the ducts which were suspended have been severed. Aval nesunim heim, but they're still situated. Soichakis in the scrotum. Hakis lo litlash. The scrotum is not torn off. Interesting. Like, what? Why would someone do this? And the verse says that in the land you shouldn't do it, but why would someone do this? I guess maybe it's diseased or something. Karus or cut. Krusim bikli, cut off with an implement, with some kind of vessel, like a knife, I guess. Not by hand, as was previously. But they're still in the scrotum. Maris. The Targum Onkeles Aramis is bring it, yeah, Lashon Katisha, of crushing. Kosus, you're talking about the Reeses, and Kosus, it's the translation is that Resisim Ba'izagol Resisim, that it was smashed to smithereens. Resisim Bekias Dakais, and to find splinters, just bringing different places where the word, you know, bringing out the definition of this word. Kanam Rusas, shattered reed. Okay. And in your land, don't do this. Davar said this thing. Nesaris shum behema, to castrate a domesticated animal. Aha, b'chaya, or a wild beast. Oh, interesting. Okay. So this is castration. You're not allowed to do that. Which, yeah, when you go to a vet, you know, that's one of the things that veterinarians do. But this is, the Torah is telling us over here, it's a problem for veterinarians, you know? They're not allowed to do this. And this is an often thing that's done with animals. Even if it's a non-kosher animal, that's why it says in your land. The rabbis call it meaning anything that's in your land, even if it's a non-kosher species, you're not allowed to castrate. The rabbis is a sheba artzachem, right? That's what it means in saying in your land. It means anything's in your land, right? Otherwise, it's superfluous to say it. Just say don't do this. Yeah, Shalaimar, you can't say Lunis have all the stories. They were not commanded in regard to castration, it's only in the land of Israel. Because the prohibition against castration is an obligation of the body, right? It's got nothing to do with the land. When you speak about growing something on the land, right? And you have to give Meiser Shane, you have to give tithing. So then you can say that's only a law on the land that you have to give second tithes and bring it to Jerusalem, for example, right? And eat it only in holiness in Jerusalem, because that's connected to the land. But an animal's not connected to the land. An animal's an animal anywhere, right? So what he's saying is he can't say that it's only in the land, even though the verse says, because this is castration has to do with the body of an animal. Whether inside the land or outside of the land. So then why does it say Be'artzachem? My gosh. Ah. Okay, Leslie, here. Okay. Why is the verse? If the law is castration, you're not allowed to castrate any here in Montreal. A veterinarian is not allowed to castrate an animal. That's the law. Right? Anywhere. Yeah, but why does it say Ba'artzachem? Then why does it say in your land? So that's what Rashi is saying. In your land means even if it's a non-kosher animal, because in your land there's kosher and non-kosher animals. Right? So land doesn't mean only in the land of Israel, because it's got nothing, the mitzvah of not castrating, or the prohibition of not castrating, has nothing to do with the land. It's got to do with the body of an animal. You know, as opposed to when you grow, when you grow fruits, Bikor and first fruits is in the land, that you have to bring the first fruits of the land to the holy temple. So that's something that's got to do with the land. So why does it say over here in the land when it's got nothing to do with the land? Meaning non-kosher animals too, because in the land there's also non-kosher animals. That's what it means. Why did it say it that way? So we can learn it out that way. You following, folks? Yeah, Liba, Ayan, Vida, got it? Okay, that was beautiful. Yeah, you got it there, Leslie. Okay. Okay. Now, interesting, by the way, non-Jews can bring offerings in the Holy Temple, right? There's different parameters to the law. And that's the whole story with the Kamsa. Bar Kamsa, the second holy temple got destroyed, right? Which we won't go into now, but we'll just see over here. Okay, verse 25. And from the hands of a non-Jew. Do not bring the bread of God, the food of God, from the non-Jew, from all of these, right? In other words, these animals that are defective, also a non-Jew can't bring. For they will not attain favor for you, right? In other words, a non-Jew wants to gain atonement from God, right? They're not going to get it if it's also got a blemish. But interesting, there's a difference. Let's see if Rashi, if it's here in this verse. It's not as stringent the law for the non-Jew as it is for the Jew. But let's see Rashi, okay? From the hand of a stranger, carbon to bring an offering, biyad kayin, through. Why does it say in the hand? What do you mean the hand of the stranger? Right, that's literally what those words mean. So Rashi is saying because the non-Jew is not bringing a sacrifice. It's the Kohen that's bringing the sacrifice. He's just bringing it to the Kohen, just like an Israelite doesn't bring the sacrifice. He brings it to the Kohen. So the same thing as bringing over here, saying to the hand of the stranger, of the non-Jew, meaning by the hand of the Kohen that the non-Jew is bringing. To offer to God. Should not offer balmum, a blemished animal. Although that even though the blemish animals were not forbidden, the offering of the sons of Noach, meaning a non-Jew, unless it was missing a limb, an entire limb. That law applies to the platforms which were in the field, an altar that was not in the holy temple, in other words, right? Or the tabernacle. But when it comes to the altar of the tabernacle or the holy temple, they can't offer. In other words, before there was the Mishkan, right? Why would the non-Jew do that? Because there's good real good non-Jews who recognize that they're going to get atonement through the God's temple. So they want atonement for things in life, right? They want to get close to God, so they can bring, right? I mean, it's not something like it's not something they're obliged to bring, right? A Jew has an obligation at certain points, right? So they're not obliged to bring, but they can bring, right? And it's accepted. Now, what he's saying over here is interesting, is before there was a Mishkan, the tabernacle, right? So non-Jews also brought offerings. They're called B'nai Noach, right? The descendants of Noach, non-Jews. But then there was no temple, so they could bring a blemished animal as long as it wasn't missing a limb. Now that there is a tabernacle and a holy temple, or after that point, right? The laws are more restrictive, and they can't bring a blemish as the things that were mentioned previously. Okay, but an emblem, but they should only bring a unblemished animal. Should be accepted from the non-Jew. That's why it says above, ish, man, any man. Right, rabbis is an to include non-Jews, who pledge vows and voluntary offering. Israel, like the people of Israel, right? So they can bring. So they're creating the image of God. They want that image of God to be, whole and complete. Mashchasom, their corruption, chabulan, as Unkelis translates their injury. Because if it's God, an injury too, it will not be an appeasement for you, to be an atonement on their behalf. So what does it mean they won't be appeased? Means there won't be an atonement for them. So it's got to be, yeah. So it's interesting though, in the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, where Kamsa took, an offering from Caesar, and he said, "Nah, the Jews are rebelling against you. They're not going to accept it." So he made a cut on the lip, right, which is not acceptable offering for a Jew to bring. And but on the lip, if there's a cut for, so it could be offered as from by a non-Jew, and this is coming from Caesar. So a whole debate about that. So I don't know how that fits in with this, but this is Chumash and Rashi, so we're not gonna. I don't know. Okay. Verse 26, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, short or kesef, a bull, or a sheep, or a goat, yivoled when it's born. V'haya shivas yamim, and it'll be says for 7 days, tachasima with its mother. Umiyem mashmini, on the eighth day, Mahala, and further, Yiratzu lekorban, it could be appeased as it could be a willing sacrifice. Yishel Hashem, a fire offering to God. In other words, you can't offer before the eighth day, right? An offering of an animal. It has to be with its mother first. Ki yavale, when it will give birth, pratli eitzedef, and this is an exclusion of a cesarean section, because that's all called birth, because it didn't go through the birth canal. Oh, it seems like, so it means it can't even be offered if it's cesarean section. Interesting. Okay. 28. Short or so a ox, a bull, or a sheep. I say it, there's benai, and the child, the offspring, in other words, don't slaughter them on the same day. I say there's benai, it and its offering, and its offspring rather. Nayeg, this law applies, but nekeva with a female, with the female, with the mother, right? She also it's forbidden to slaughter ha'im, the mother, ba'ben, or abbas, or the son or the daughter on the same day. But does not apply to with males, with the male parent. It's permitted to slaughter a ben, the father and the son, on the same day. Interesting, there's a debate on this, but this is what Rashi is saying. I don't know how Rashi gets this because it says oisai is him, oisa is her. How does he get that it's only female? If anything, I would say that it's the father, not the mother. Oisai, again, is masculine. And Benoi is his son, not her son. Wow. This needs understanding. Okay. Aizav is Benai, it and its offspring, Benai, Aizav Mishma. Its offspring first, and then it is also implied. Sure. 29. Okay. Okay, now that was a peace offering that we were talking about, right? Now we're going to a Thanksgiving offering, right? Kis is when you will slaughter zevach, a feast offering, toida, thanksgiving, like toda, toda rabba, thank you very much, right? Sorry. La Hashem to God, l'ritzonchem tizbechu, um, to gain favor, you should offer it. Rashi l'ritzonchem tizbechu. And Rashi in 29, to gain favor on your behalf. Tchilas es vichasam, at the outset of your slaughter of the Thanksgiving offering. Hisarishte shitiyah l'rotzen lachem. Aha, so it's interesting. It says at the, right, it's saying here at the beginning, right? No, it says when you're offering it, or where you're slaughtering it, has to be with favor, right? So in other words, in order that it should be accepted on your behalf, what is the condition of gaining favor? Hmm. Hold on. Ah, okay. Rashi's connecting this verse with the next verse, which the next verse says, on that day you should eat it, right? So what does it mean that you're going to have, that it will be favorable to God? Is that you're going to eat it on that day, right? On the same day, but loy bala hazir. So the verse doesn't come here to warn us on anything. Shetiyah shchita al menas came, that the slaughter has to be on the condition, right, that it has to be slaughtered for the sake of a Thanksgiving offering. Al tishchatu, do not slaughter it al manas la'ochlai, on the condition to eat it lamachar, the following day, shem techash v'boy, because if you do think to slaughter it at a time when you're not allowed to, the mechshev is psul, this is disqualification, this is a thought that disqualifies the offering. Right? In other words, if when you're slaughtering it, you're thinking, oh, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to have family gathering, so I'm going to eat it tomorrow with the family, right? That's a disqualifying thought because it has to be eaten on that day, as the next verse will say. Lo yelachem l'ratz, and this will not be something that will gain favor for you. Right? You have to eat it on that day. Yeah. I'm sorry. Let me make sure I said that properly. When you're slaughtering it, you have to have being mindful that you're slaughtering it on condition to eat it today and not tomorrow. If you had thought to eat it out of its time frame, that thought itself disqualifies the offering. Alternative understanding of these words, right? Right. What does it mean that you're doing it favorably, this slaughter? Right. So in this first explanation, it's connecting it to the next verse, that what's favorable, that you're going to, when you slaughter it, you're going to be mindful of eating it in its proper time today. Alternative explanation, what does it mean over here? It means with your awareness that it will be favorable. From here, we understand regarding the who performs the action inadvertently, shapasul, that it's invalid. Beshchitas kachim, with respect to slaughtering a holy offering, afalpi, even though shapara, that the Torah specifically says about an offering that's not valid when the slaughterer has in mind it will be beyond the time limit. With regard to those offerings are eaten in for 2 days. It comes and states specifically again here, that's eaten on 1 day. Hmm. Okay. Something I'm not perfectly clear on that, but we're going to move forward. But Yaimahu, on that day, Ye'echol, you should eat it, right? This is the Thanksgiving offering, right? Thanksgiving offering you bring for if you traveled in the desert, they came safely. If you over the sea, if you were in prison and you got released, a mother who gives birth to a baby, she brings this offering. Um, yeah. V'yaimahu, on that day, ye'achal, it should be eaten. Lo yisatzir mimenu, and don't leave, and no leftovers. Ad boiker, until the morning. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Right. So, in other words, it can be eaten that day until the morning. V'yaimahu ye'achal, le'ba'al hazir ella. This comes to to warn Shetiyeh Shchita Salman asking that the slaughter has to be on this condition. Shem Likvoya Lazman Achila. If it mentions to set the time for it, we already know this. We already learned this already in chapter 7, verse 15. Right? So we already know this law. So why is it being repeated over here? To tell us that not only you can't literally eat it beyond that day, that frame of time, which is that day until the morning, but if you had the thought to eat it the wrong time, that itself is a prohibition. Who's going to know? Well, God knows. If a person's God-fearing, then they had the wrong thought. They're going to know that invalidated, and they're not going to bring it as an offering. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Know that who issued the decree? Allah dabar. Don't take this lightly. In other words, it's only a thought, right? So I said, well, so you're going to play games with yourself, and I didn't really think it. No one knows the better. Ani Hashem, I'm God. He knows better. He knows. So don't make this light in your eyes if you had the wrong thought of when to eat it. 31. And you should heed, safeguard my mitzvahs. And you should do them. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Rashi, Ushmartim, zu a Mishnah. This refers to study. Oh, that's interesting, right? Right, to learn. Right, that's what's going to safeguard doing mitzvahs when you study about it, right? That's the act, the practice of doing the mitzvah. Very, very nice. Okay. Okay. Two more verses. Do not desecrate my holy name. Ooh, okay. That I should be sanctified, that I will be sanctified amongst the Jewish people. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, Mikad Dishchem. I am Hashem who sanctifies you. And it's going to continue the next verse. That took you out of the land of Egypt. To me. You're God for you, Ani Hashem, I am God. Psh. Okay, let's see Rashi. This is Sikha this week on this. Okay, should not defile love or al devarai, to violate my words. Mizidim, intentionally. Mimishma shenemar. By implication, this means you should not defile, can infer the opposite state of the sanctifying. God's sanctification will exist if there's no defilement. So why does the verse say explicitly minikdashti? Others, why does it have to say, and I will be sanctified? When it says, if you won't, if you're not going to profane my holy name, well, isn't that holy, right? Why do you have to say now will be sanctified? This means surrender yourself. To sanctify my name. Meaning, this is talking about giving up your life now as a Jew. This is where we learn the law of Mesiras Nefesh, of giving up your life. Where the law is. So, Yochid, I might think that based on this verse, the obligation that I have to submit myself to death rather than violate God's commandments is in the presence of one individual even, right? You know, one individual's got a gun at me, and he a gun at a Jew, and he's saying, go bow down to this idol, right? So based on I might think that it's in this, one person. Talmud Leimer, the verse said, "B'sei b'nei Israel," amongst the Jewish people, which implies that there are many witnesses to you bowing down to this idol rather than giving up your life. So when you surrender yourself, give yourself over lamos in the condition that you're going to die. Because anybody surrenders themselves on condition that a miracle will be done for them. In other, understand that God will act miraculously to save him. And, God's not going to make a miracle for you, right? Because you're not really giving yourself over. Give yourself over, even if it means you're going to die. Shekim Atzino Bechanani Mishal Bezariah. So we find Bechanani Mishal and Bezariah Shaloi Mosru Atzma. They did not surrender themselves Amanas Hanes on condition of the miracle. As it says, and if not, then he will not save us. Let it be known to you, O king. They said, Matzil, whether he saves or doesn't save us, right? Let it be known to you that we're ready to give up our lives. It's a story in Jeremiah from Nebuchadnezzar, and these three of Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah who gave up their life. Over there, in the end, a miracle happened. Okay, 33. So we said it took you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God. I am God. Ametzi Eschem took you out. On this for this purpose. I am trustworthy that I will pay the reward for someone who gives up their life instead of committing idolatry, adultery, or murder of another person. All right. Amazing stuff. Okay, we'll see you in a few moments with